Poetry is present throughout the collection of the Aga Khan Museum, and not only on the manuscripts and folios, but on many of the items and objects that are on display, including, for example, all the luster bowls and dishes or jars that we have on display. And this, for example, this 15th century wooden panel that is inscribed with the poetry of Hafez is another example that we have here. So one aspect, like this is one of the key features of the Islamic art, and then that you can see and you can read poetry on, like, for example, on everyday objects, on decorative elements, and also on the as well as the manuscripts and folios. In some cases, for the item that we have on display, for example, these two candlesticks, one has inscriptions from Hafiz and the other one from Sadi, and other poets as well. Like there are multiple poetry verses on these objects. So the text refers somehow, gives us a hint about the function of the artifact, the object. For example, in this case, because it's a candlestick or a torch stand, the text, most of the text refers to the love of a moth for light and how it's been dragged towards the light, and the spiritual meanings behind it. Also, in addition, this not only it kind of this poetry kind of connects us to the poets that had this poetry, like I said, these poetry centuries ago, but it also connects us to the previous owner of these objects, the one who commissioned these ones, and the choice of poetry, like. For example, why they chose this particular poetry rather the other one, and then it kind of tells us something about the person who actually at the beginning commissioned this particular object. And also one other aspect of poetry is that it's not only something that is written, and a huge part of it is actually something that it's about memory, and it's about reciting the poetry. Even on the Hafiz panel that we just saw the other side of the gallery, the last part of the verse on the lower left, Hafiz himself says that one of the accomplishments that it's good for you to have in life, other than the rest of the things that he is saying in the poetry, is that try to remember, try to recite my poetry. As karha ke koni she'r Hafiz az bar kon. And this is exactly what it is, what's the way it is in the culture. And before you even start reading the poetry, is something that you've listened to, it's something that you've heard from your parents, grandparents, and it's kind of a link that it's like a bridge or link to the previous generation, and the way that is kind of like a chain connects you to the poet many centuries ago. Other examples that we have on display, for example, is in the Shahnameh section. We have examples that are on display from Shahnameh, which is the epic poem of Iran, written by Ferdowsi in 1010. So it's been known as being the longest epic poem written by one poet at one time. And we have examples on display from 14th century, 15th century, and then most of the time we have an example from the great Shahnameh of Shah Tahmasp on display from Safavid time. And also Mughal Indian copies of Shahnameh we have also on display. And this manuscript that we have in the middle is actually volume 1 of a 2-volume Shahnameh. And it's been the paintings are attributed to Imam Musawwir, and it's been produced in 1657. Other than Shahnameh, there are poetry from Nizami, Masnavi of Mawlavi, and other poets on display throughout the gallery. And again, as mentioned earlier, it's not only on the manuscript that the poetry exists, but you can see, you can read, and then enjoy and listen to the poetry on many of the other objects that are on display throughout the gallery.